Okay, so why don't we get started? So what I'm trying to do is aim so that we can finish a little bit early today, so that if you do have questions, you can ask me now, or I'm assuming that in the next couple weeks, you have a ridiculous amount of assignments that are due.
Oh, yeah.
So I
Just a few of them.
well, I've just given you a new one. So there you go. All right. So what's wrong with the way we've done this?
Nothing, it works.
It works. Okay. So let's go into it then and run it. Now, if we go back to the first part of the class where I was talking about the problem with the end user, the ID10T error or the Pt2 error. You guys have heard those phrases, right? I've used them in class. Yes. Okay. So the ID10T error would be, okay, so Keith. Now this will work because originally I set it up as an int. You guys talked me out of using an int. So this will work in one sense, right? So I go like that and it'll make sense. You have one bedroom. If you set it up as an int, what's going to happen to your code? Your code will just stop working. And what happens if the person enters in -1? It'll work. But what's the problem with that? Okay, it's not an integer, but the other problem is you can't live physically in a home with -1 bedrooms. So there's your challenge. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about input validation. So basically what we can do is we can programmatically control what type of thing that the person is entering into certain points of the field. All right. So what would be, and I'm going to pull up an Excel file here. Actually, no, I'm not. Let's go here. All right, so I'm going to post this under week 11. So if you guys are looking for it for review or whatever the case might be, that's where you'll find it. So the question I'm going to ask is, what types of inputs would require us to verify that they're entering it in correctly? So I've demonstrated one. Say, for example, if you're asking for something that's a real number from 0 to whatever, we want to validate that that's in fact a real number, or that we want to validate that they're using a numerical input. Okay, so those are two. But just let me pull it all up so then I can turn it to the audience participation part of the class. All right. So this is types of validation. All right, so what types of validation do you think that we could need? So the one would be numeric. That's the one that I've already used. Sorry, I took your thunder. Yeah. You stole mine. Okay, so we got the numeric. What other types of things in a web app or in a web form will we need to validate? Okay, so we got passwords, and then we've got emails. Now, here's the challenge with an email. When we're validating an email, can we validate whether or not it's a real email address? Can we do it through our code? No. There's no way to validate whether or not the email that they provide is a valid email address. However, what we're talking about is the formatting of an email address. So we can validate the format only, Because what happens if, say, for example, someone were to enter in no email address in your form? What would happen when you run that? Say, for example, they fill it all out, they write in no email address, they submit, and then you go to try to send them an email. What's going to happen? It's going to bounce, or you're going to get errors, or even worse, you could get what's called being blacklisted from your email address provider or supplier, not email address, but your broadcast email provider. And what that is say, for example, there's one, I don't know if they're still here or not, but there's one just down the street called oneshoppingcart.com. I used to work for them. And what they would do is they would allow users to import lists into their broadcast email server, and then they could set up HTML formatted emails, send it out. And you know how you get the emails that look just really, really nice with the pictures and the banners and everything? Those are HTML formatted. So they would allow that. But if you get too many spam complaints, there's watchdog agencies out there, or there used to be for overseeing Canada. One was called Spam House. And what they would do is if people complain too much about spam emails, then that server would get blacklisted. So yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Because what that means is a broadcast email service provider uses shared IP addresses. So you're on my IP address, Steven's on my IP, Nick's on my IP, Linda's on my IP, and I get the complaints. I shut down the IP address. Guess what happens with everyone's account? They can't send out email until I now, as the service provider, can whitelist that. So, and that's a massive undertaking. So it's really significant to do this. Now, the other thing, is anyone familiar with what was launched in 2015? I believe it was July 1st, 2015, that made broadcast emails a real challenging thing? It's CASL, C-A-S-L, Canadian Anti-Spam Legislation. And what that would do is basically, now as web marketers, online marketers, broadcast emailers, we now have a set of guidelines that we have to follow. One of them is there must be an unsubscribe link at the bottom. The other one is that the person has to opt into the list. Exactly. Well, it doesn't. Yeah, but this. Well, okay, no, it doesn't automatically. So, say for example, you're on my email list, and I send you, and I've bought your email address. Okay, so I send it out to you. If you don't like it, you delete it or you unsubscribe. Done. But if you complain, that's when the issue happens. Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't register to it's a spam.
Yep.
Please take care of it.
Yep.
That's when you get a slap on the nose.
Okay. Now, well, it depends on what you define as a slap. Because with CASL, does anyone know what the fines can go up to per complaint? Up to $1 million per complaint. So if you do the math, if you send out, if you say, for example, purchase an email list of 1 million names, and you send it out and say 500 people complain, and they institute that fine, that's a $500 million fine. And that's not just for corporations, that's for individuals as well. Now, chances are the individuals aren't going to be $1 million fine. That's the $1 million fine is more designed for repeat offenders. But so yeah, it's really significant when you're coding to make sure that you've got a checkbox saying, yes, I want to receive my emails available. Yeah.
Now, for that, could you have like automatically check the box and you can...
It's like you read my mind? Okay. No. According to CASL, that checkbox must not be checked. And the reason is because that's what's called implied consent. So if it's already checked, I can now argue as the recipient of your email address, I didn't check that box physically. It was pre-checked. So now the onus of responsibility is back on your shoulders. So there's a lot of gray areas, but yes, absolutely, you've got to make sure that that checkbox is there. Yeah.
What about when people have, like, input their email in order to receive this?
Yeah.
And in order to proceed, they have to check the box.
That's fine, because now what you're doing is
Choosing
exactly.
what content,
Yeah.
And then they have.
And you're developing what's called a pre-existing business condition before you receive your first email. So when you say, for example, an excellent example of this would be ebooks. So say, for example, you've got this great ebook that you want and it's free, and all you have to do is sign up to their mailing list. So the moment you sign up to the mailing list to get that free thing, you've created a pre-existing business relationship. They cannot get sued at that point. Now, if there was nothing there and you signed up and it was pre-checked, they're vulnerable. Like, the corporation is vulnerable. The other thing is, what a lot of organizations are doing is what's called a double opt-in. So you've got the checkbox that the person clicks the checkbox, and if you think to your own usages, you select the checkbox, submit, and then you get an email saying, are you really sure that you want to receive emails from us? And then you click, yeah, validate my email address. Now they've got what's called a double opt-in, and that's the safest thing for a corporation. So if you're coding, or if your boss comes to you or a client comes to you and says, I want a newsletter sign-up sheet, that's what I would recommend. First off, it has to be an unchecked. The second thing that you've got to do is do what's called a double opt-in. Highly, highly, highly recommend that.
So it's like you sign in and then please verify. Yes, this is
Yes.
email verification.
So I've signed in and this is my email address and I definitely want your emails. And then you're protected. Okay, so we've got emails. We can validate format. We can't validate whether or not it's an authentic email. The secondary, like the double opt-in, would validate that, because then if I said Joe Smith at Gmail, Joe Smith would get the email and Joe Smith wouldn't click, yes, I want that. So that's where you can get around that. What other things can we validate though?
Validate the Xbox, the font,
Okay, I'm gonna let you formulate that one. I'm gonna type in phone number because I heard it over here. Okay, but think about what you were trying to say, and then I'll come right back to you. So phone number. Now, again, kind of similar to an email address. Can we validate that the phone number is real? No, but what are we validating? The format. So one of the problems is, and this is something that I don't know if you guys do business intelligence tools, but in the computer programming, Stephen, you're going to come across this, which is, it's basically analytical tools. And there's a saying in data analysis, garbage in, garbage out. So the problem that you're going to have when you're validating phone numbers is some people go 705 and then whatever the number is. Then some people will go 705 dash, and then this, and then this. And then some people just go straight across the whole 10 characters. So as programmers, we have to make sure that the people are entering the information in consistently. Because what happens is, if I run a report on all my phone numbers and they look all over the place, it's going to become unusable, especially if you're importing this into a database, like an Access database or something like that. So we need to validate the formatting of the phone number. What else do we need? Now, Nick, did you figure out what you were trying to say?
Nope.
Payment information. Okay. So just the actual payment? Okay, so whether or not there's money, you mean, or just the formatting?
Well, like formatting, that it's real credit card number,
Yeah.
and payment goes through.
Okay.
Like the other systems like Apple Pay or PayPal or now your debit cards or Visas or MasterCards as well.
Okay. So,
Different payment variables.
okay, so then,
Top of like a payment
okay, so payment variable.
variable being like MasterCard. You have different
Types of, so we'll call it types of payment.
types, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put the other one in there that we spoke of, which is checkbox. We need to validate whether that's it. Yeah. Postal code? Okay.
Depending on what kind of site it is, American or Canadian, right?
Well, and there's the challenge that as a programmer, you're going to have to validate, like you were saying, that it'll bark at you and say, whoa, wait a minute here. You put a space in, there shouldn't be a space. And then you put a space and goes, oh, well, no, there shouldn't be a space and you should have capitals, not. So, but that's the only in Canada. Now, what Nick said is very valid, which is the states have a completely different method. Okay, so here's a question: like, if we're validating that, how do we validate two separate ones? Like, and you can. An if statement. So if the states then follow this validation, if Canada follow this validation, okay? But, well, okay, and now the other problem is that, well, not the problem, but the nice thing is that that Britain uses the same postal code system as we do. But so absolutely, you've got to validate the postal codes. Americans have a zip code, and what was happening is once it's a 5-digit zip code. There was a TV show in the 90s, I think it was 90210, and the world knows what the zip code is for Beverly Hills because of that. It's kind of like your generation all know how to spell bananas. So anyhow. No, it's the song.
Wait, that's actually the
Yeah, 90210. Yeah, that's why they called the show 90210. It wasn't an accident. So that was great. But now what's happened is the population has grown to such an extent, and the metropolises have grown to such an extent that it's no longer any good just to go 90210. Now they had to add dash and another 4-digit character for some areas. So, for example, if you're in Alaska, you've got a zip code dash and then a 4-digit forwarding thing. So, as programmers, we have to stay on top of these types of things. No, I think that Alaska shares their zip code. I think. I don't know. I'm not much on American.
Alaska's zip code is like that is because of the distance it's spread out.
I know. You would think so. But don't forget, it's also geographic territory. So, so you've got, say, for example, Anchorage, and then the next nearest town could be hundreds of miles away. They're not going to all have the same one. Yeah. So, anyhow.
It's basically the state code, zip code, and then the city code is their 4-digit for Alaska because of where they're sitting. It's kind of like in the Northwest Territories when you go up farther, like in Iqaluit, all that. They have one. Yes, it is exactly.
Okay. Anyways, what other validation do we need? Ryan. Ooh, SQL insertion. Okay. A little bit above our pay grade right now, but we'll just put that one in there. What's the worst one that you can get in there for an SQL insertion? What's the worst thing that you can put in for an drop table? Drop table basically deletes everything, like the whole thing. There was a, whether or not it's true or not, there's a wives, not a wives' tale, but urban legend. Thank you. There's an urban legend that a guy kept getting caught at a red light camera, and they would be dinging him because they said, you keep going through, and he'd be stopped. So finally he changed his license plate to drop table. So when the red light camera took a picture of his license plate, apparently it deleted everything because it dropped the table. So yes, SQL insertion, very, very bad. You'd want to make sure that that's validated. What other stuff though? Real more basic. That's like above where we are right now. Yep. Anybody else? Think about some of your forms that you're entering. Yep.
Like, I guess when you like certain websites, if they have like an authenticator,
Yeah,
they would like want you to validate like after you put email and password,
okay.
like whatever number this is on.
So you're like a CAPTCHA code? Okay, so we'll type in CAPTCHA. Now here's something interesting that I wasn't aware of until recently. Google actually utilizes their CAPTCHA code to validate their data. So, for example, you know how the Google cars go around and take pictures of everything? If they've got a physical street address they can't read, and if you think back to your CAPTCHA codes, it says what number is up here, you're not actually performing just verifying that you're a human. Their system couldn't read that street address. So if enough people say that sign is 112, they don't have to research it. So you're doing their research for them. So, well, it's not lazy if you can do it. Okay, so CAPTCHA codes, excellent. I'm gonna elaborate. I think it was on Shannon's when she said password. Username certainly is another one. But what other things can we do? Can anyone think of any others? Unit numbers. So units. So again, so if you're in an order form, you can't have, you can't order, if you're ordering the iPhone, you can't order a B iPhone. You have to order one iPhone, two iPhones. So you're looking for the actual units that are being ordered. Okay. So verifications, yeah. Yep. Date and time. Wow, look at that. Okay. Units. Thank you. And I think I saw a hand. Yep, Ryan. Confirmation. Okay, so as you can see, there's lots of reasons to do input validation. I'm going to post this up so that way you've got some just in case you need to study, and this might be a question. I don't think I don't think I would ask you to list off, but certainly, is this a type of verification or validation? That might be an idea. Okay. All right. So go back here. So what kinds of problems we've talked about the email? If we're not validating the formatting, that this could be a bit of a nightmare. Phone numbers, same idea. We've talked about this. There's lots of things that can happen with bad data. And the worst one is that we didn't put in there is validating that there's something that's not blank, that's a required field. Because now, Ryan, you mentioned SQL. What's the worst thing that could happen if you've got a field that's not filled in? What's that called? A null value. Well, it's a null value. And what happens is in a null value situation, most analysts would take all of what you collected off that user and throw it in the garbage, because it depends on your school of thought. But some people say, well, okay, if it's a null value, we can't use that data. Some say we'll use that data up to the null value or after the null value, whichever. But it creates a whole world of problems. So you validate to make sure that the fields are being filled in. So there's lots of problems that can happen from it. So when we're validating using C#, we're using mostly if statements. We're going to be trying a couple different ones, no pun intended, as I'm going to get into it in a second. You can use HTML5 to enforce different things that you can do. But now here's where the pun was coming in, is what we're going to do today is called a try parse. All right, some of you did that on your assignment 1, and you'll be glad you did when you hear about the mini assignment. So a try parse basically means take whatever information is in that string and try parsing it into an integer. And if it's an integer, it's perfect, and it'll return whatever's in that variable. If it's not, then it'll throw an error. Do you follow that? So say, for example, if we type in how many units do you want to order, and we type in A, then it'll take A and it'll try to parse it into an integer. Now, can we parse the letter A into an integer? Can we parse the letter A into into an integer? No, because a Roman numeral is not an integer. Okay, so it won't work. So then it'll throw an error. But if we enter 1 in and we try to parse it from that string, will it parse into an integer? Yes. So at that point, we can say, okay, you know what? That is a valid entry. Okay. And again, this also can check for blank values or nulls. And here's the formatting here. So basically, what we're doing is we're saying if int.32 try parse. So what we're saying is we want to try to parse int32 age. So the age variable, we want to try to parse that. And if it returns that, then you output the age. If not, you would output the then you would output the error message here. What error message here? So if it does parse, we output the age, and it goes into the LBL output. Does that make sense? So we go through. Someone enters in 1. It says, can you parse that into an integer? Yes. Bang, and it goes into here. Now this is the input field that we're talking about right there. And if not, if you can't, then you enter in the invalid age. And that's where your message, this says an LBL message, but we're going to use what's called a message box. Does that make sense? I see a few confused faces. You don't want to, are you good?
Seems like an extra step for kind of no reason, but it does make sense.
Okay, so interesting. How do you feel it's no reason?
Not no reason. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, so here's something.
I mean, if you have your box here, straighten off, I mean, you can print it.
All right, so let's try
We're
something.
dealing with the code flow, like you were saying. That's if you're going,
Hit 32.
because see, that's what was happening to me, because you asked, like, did it turn,
So let's go into this. All right.
that's where I was going with mine. Like
So now let's run it. So, and I know that what did I do? Yeah. See how guilty I sound. What did I do? What did I do wrong? Okay, so Nick, you've got a valid point, because I'm sure it's not just you going, well, why are we having to do this? So there it goes. So I've got Keith, and let's go -1. You have -1 bedrooms. Okay, so that's fine. It doesn't do anything.
technically, it's still a number, though.
Okay, so now let's enter A. What do you think is going to happen?
It's still gonna run as a bedroom.
Is that what you think? It breaks the code, because we're trying to convert A into an integer, and A is not there. So if this is a live web form, you're going to have people complaining. You know what? I live at A123 Street. Or here's a worse one is people that well, not even apartments, but duplexes, where they've got 123 any street, but now it's 123-A. So you've got to now separate the two things out. But otherwise, you see what happens. So that's why we do that. Yeah, so that now if you think back to what I was just saying, so the int32 try parse. So if someone were to type in that A that we were talking about without that, it'll break your code. But if we've got the try parse, it'll tell you that it's valid. And if it's valid, then it'll output the age, and it drops the age into your command prompt. If not, if this doesn't output as an age, it's going to return an error message.
That happened too, like for the street address, when you have duplexes or apartment complexes, have whatever street.
Yeah.
13A.
Yeah.
whatever.
So how do you handle that then? So you would put street number, 13, and then you can put unit number as a separate box. Because a unit number is a little bit more challenging, because it can be either a numeric or it can be an alpha. So that's how I would handle it. So going on that, we've gone through that. Okay, so let's go back to our exercise now. And I'm gonna convert this all back to where we, actually, no, let's start it here for now. So you guys talked me out of my exercise because this is what I was trying to demonstrate, was it would break it if we entered in an A. So how can we solve this problem based on what we were doing? I'll walk you through the first step. The first thing we've got to do is now change that back to a string, and we don't have to convert anything. So how do we validate that that string is actually an int? Try to parse it into an integer. Okay. So we start. All right. I keep banging my knee. My apologies. Well, my apologies to my knee, I guess. Okay. So we start with okay. Does anyone want to try? What would be the first thing we would start with? Okay, actually, I just changed it back. That's okay like that. All right. But what we do need to add is another integer. So say, for example, we'll call this one room count. So we've declared the room count. All right. Makes sense so far? So what next? All right. So let's start with if. Then we enclose everything in parentheses. If. Actually, you know what? Let me just verify something because I want to make sure that I'm not messing my code further. Yeah, just give me a sec, Nick. I just want to make sure that I've got my, like I say, sometimes when you're going forward step by step, you break a code. Yeah. Okay. All right, so actually, I'm going to change this back to a different code, a different variable. We're going to call it int is num. Okay, so then what we've got to do, hold on, see, I'm all over the map. Just 1 second. Okay. For those of you playing along at home, I apologize. We're going back to room count. I know. Okay, so now what we want to do is, in the if statement, we want to make it let's add one more variable. We're going to call it a bool. And everyone remember what a bool is? It's true or false. So all we're doing is we're saying bool is num equals int dot by parse. And then we're going to say it's the variable of rooms. And then we're going to output out to room count. Okay. So basically what we're doing with this Boolean statement is we're declaring it as is num, and we're saying try parsing it as an int. And what we're parsing as an int is the rooms, the string up here that we've got. And if it is an int, then output it as room count. Okay? And then we want the semicolon. Okay, so now in the if statement, because what we're trying to do is say, if it's this, then this, else this. So in the if statement, does anyone want to try? Yep. It is num. Okay. Is true. Okay. Double equal. Thank you. Well, you can assume that it's not true. You can go one of two ways.
I was, when I was trying to figure out last week's class.
Yeah.
I was going to like tutorials.
Yeah.
And it said that automatically true must be declared as false.
Well, okay, and that's what I'm saying is if what I just typed in there, if num is not true by putting the exclamation mark and equals, which would be false. I'm just using an easy example. So you can say if it's this, then that. But yes, you would declare it as.
What I'm saying is it can automatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they do like code look to say.
Okay, so then what would you put then? Then what would you put?
If it is, no,
It's not.
that's it.
Okay. So just like this? Like that? Okay, does everyone follow why? Because what we've done is we've created the bool up here. So bool is num equals into try parse. And we're trying to parse rooms. And if it's successful, it goes out to room count. Okay? So what we're saying is, and what Shannon was mentioning about whether or not it was automatically true. So we're assuming it's true if is num means that it was successfully converted over. Yep.
Doesn't we need the braces for the if statement?
Well, okay, you're focusing a little bit too far in advance right now. All I'm trying to do is drive home what we've done in this line and this line. Does everyone follow so far? Yep.
Okay. This to a false statement.
So what we're saying is if it is this,
It is the
then
number.
we're gonna do a code. And if it's not, then we're gonna do something else. Okay? But now here's something else though. So we've verified whether or not it's a int. But can you live in a negative 1-bedroom apartment? So how can you live in a negative one, or what can you do to make sure that the person's entering in the correct numbers? So why don't we go and then what we can type in is room count is greater than 0. Everyone follow that statement? So what we're doing is we're saying if this is in fact an integer and room count is greater than 0, perform this function.
Why you got double?
Because that's the end for C#. Okay, a single is there's another one for single, but a double ampersand is and. What's a double pipe? Four. Okay. All right. So we've got what we're saying is if is num and room count is greater than 0. Now what we want to do is perform a function. What would be the function? So what I'm going to do is just copy this. Actually, I'm going to edit and paste it in here. Or, okay, for those of you who aren't on Mac, Alt does not copy. I'm using my Mac codes. No, I was pushing Alt because that's kind of where the command is. Okay, so we're going to paste it in there. Okay, so you're following along? So all we've said basically is if these two things are in fact true, then label output. All right, so then, yeah. Yep, so then what's the next thing that we would do? So if it's not, else. Okay. And we're going to go like this. But what we've said is if it's true, output that to the label. Else, now what we want to do is we want to stop the person before they break your code. So we're going to do what's called a message box. And those of you who aren't familiar with the term, that's kind of the Windows-esque pop-up that says, oh, there's an alert. So we're going to type in message. box. And then what we want to do when you're using something like that, we want to show it. So message box dot show will show it. All right. And then what we can do is we can put a error message in there. No, that was a typo. My apologies. I typed the curly braces and then I thought I had deleted it and I'm looking down. Thank you. Okay, so far so good. So now what'll happen is, as I'm going to drag my computer across the floor. Okay, so what's going to happen is if you enter in something that's not a number, it's going to now pop up the message box. I think I accidentally punched in something there. But it's going to pop up the message box. It's going to show invalid entry, please try again. But now we can take it one step further. Because the last thing that we want is a person to just keep pushing submit, 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 because what's going to happen is either the person's going to get frustrated or your database could crash or whatever the case might be. So what we want to do is we want to force them to try again. And what's the best way that we can force them to try again? Clear the text box. So that way, so how would we do that, you know? Yep. I would clear the form at the same time. Okay, so in the else statement, what would be the code for that? You don't know? You're close. Okay.
Clear text.
Yeah, you're all around it. So you go text rooms dot text. Hold on, let me just verify that. No, actually, text rooms dot clear. It's a method. And that's it. So that's how close you were. It's just so close. Okay, so you just go text box clear. Well, text box dot clear, and then the parentheses and the semicolon. So let's try to run that now. So Keith, how many bedrooms do you have? A. Invalid entry. Please try again. And it clears the text box. J. Invalid entry. Let's try a minus sign. A minus one. Invalid entry. Pretty cool. So now the person is being forced to enter the right information in. So let's try 1. Ugh, I keep pushing enter. Okay, so execute. Hello, Keith. You have your home has 1 bedroom. Now, your home has 1 bedrooms. I know. For those of you who are going, wait a minute, there's a typo there. Okay, so does everyone follow that? What happened? Did you get why that executed the way it did? Yeah.
Oh, never mind. I didn't execute it all.
All right. Well, let me show you the code
I
again.
understand what.
Okay, so
Mine saying like race is our fault. Race is in the wrong state.
okay, it's just a semicolon. Semicolon. Everything, then they're gonna love you again. How do you do? Get rid of the pipe. That was my typo.
So, message box.
Now everything, the world loves you again. Now try right away. Okay. While I go around, if you're having a problem with the code, let me know. If not, why don't you guys take a 10-minute break and then I'll come back. And then we'll talk about another way to make it that we don't even need that validation.
Would this work? If the fifth.
Well, okay, yeah, that would fix it, but what happens if
Steak dinner tonight. I'll meet you.
What happens if that number is 2?
Touch my butt.
Then it just says, hello, your home has 2 bedrooms.
6
I
o'clock.
see what you're doing.
That work?
Well, it's spitting there.
Oh, there, yeah.
So
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Actually,
God,
I
I
did.
thought that was
you're
Also,
you're-
I'm having a problem with this. This is from the entire.
Okay, we gotta tell you.
Oh, yeah.
So now,
But I was having a problem with the reference. I had to get rid of the.
okay, so. So you can see the top?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to work through the
I
Christmas.
changed something. I went into some different areas, different.
Okay, so,
They're 12-hour
but this does run, right? When you run this, it will pop up the,
Or 6 in the morning.
It just runs. It runs all the code. So.
in the class, you're stealing my script. Oh, that's perfect.
When I have questions,
No, and that's, honestly, though,
Around
it's
just the
perfect,
military
because everything that you're asking is the next step. So,
That's all you do.
It's running,
I guess I think my guess was more than I think.
there you go.
So it'll only run the else. Previously, I think it ran this too when else wasn't there. The else is being
Okay,
triggered.
so we've got the print count.
Like nothing happens when.
Okay, so try to type,
Just outside of
Maybe
base.
it's different now.
with me leaning over your shoulder, you watch.
I go to friggin'.
Yeah, I did something with
I do my rounds.
Okay, so so close that.
Oh, yeah, he'll capture.
So,
it was like where,
5 buildings total to
I
check,
went into that.
and I can have them all done within 6 hours. I can have.
okay, yeah,
have
if you've
my
changed
first night
the actual method,
I thought I got it,
checking everything.
cause it said, oh, one reference, and then, oh, here it is, it's right to it.
Yeah, but that was
Change
walking
that
through all, you know, 5 of the shafts, checking all the floors.
Yeah, this previous.
Checking all the
it said
doors,
one
checking
more.
everything else.
so is that the way you name the button?
Oh, wait, no, it's not a capital E.
And what about the submit?
Oh, then it asked me, yeah, it said you should change it to a capital E.
Interesting.
And then it
I've gone
highlighting that.
So yeah, it's not liking that.
6 to midnight or 6 to.
Not-
Oh, wait, it says 4 more.
Getting a phone call on my way in.
I meant the, because I wanted this all to be connected to the thing that has it, right?
Yeah.
To go to this building.
So how can I get this call
Because the
to
vault got- the vault alarm
activate, like, you have to load
went off,
that.
and it was all weapons
Okay,
in the vault.
You have to load the program.
yeah, no, it has to hold the form, yeah.
And then I need to make like a whole,
I went there.
So what is it that
Like
you
I was
hold?
streaming base.
this.
It's just the button.
This from form, I changed this from form.
Try changing that to.
Put in there. Sat there from 8 to
You could get
until the guy came in. He literally closed the door. Reset for 3 seconds. Put it
Yeah,
in.
so now try running it
Hit
again.
enter. Put it in code again. Hit enter. Spun the door lock. Hit the
That's
code.
okay.
It spun the door unlocked. I'm like.
So far, so good.
He's like.
Well, do your references. There's no reference.
Is that because it's the wrong? Yeah, okay, close that off.
So that.
Stop your hours. Change it to what is your
He
button?
was like, what? I'm like, dude.
Okay, so now
Walk
try.
in here, wait.
And my right.
Close the door. Spun the
So
door
now
lock.
running.
Enter. Spun the door unlocked. opened it, closed it,
Like,
locked the door. You were here for 5 minutes. Oh, I get minimal of a half hour. I'm like, that's what we did here 5 minutes. You have to be here over 15 minutes if you're here an hour. Yeah.
At the beginning, I kept looking for it. And then that created
They
like
you
these
sit here
objects.
for 4 hours after 12 hours.
And then I didn't get rid of it.
The code is broken.
But I was thinking, maybe I could just recreate this and then kind of say, okay, take this, but only run it when you can run or something.
Give that a try. Yeah, I saw that. It's rough light. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what you've done in the back end.
But I think the code looks
The
correct.
code is correct.
Yeah.
So it's just what you've done in the back end.
I mean, this is already back end, and then there's the back end to the back end.
Exactly.
I don't like that.
Can't find my rationale anywhere. One rationale, 3-page rationale.
No.
It was 3 pages, gone. It was like completely.
Like you. I don't know. John is in there. I skip every week that I don't have an assignment. I skip the class for that reason. Until I do powerful through my after.
Last Friday.
It's not the last. No, it's not the last. It's my fault. It is. You're right.
All Friday night, all Saturday, I actually slept. Yeah. we looked at them. I'm used to that, but now it's ridiculous. Like Friday night, I was frustrated with it.
Washroom.
I emailed you, I'll be ready. Family first. Okay. Try and find her email. I'm scared right now.
I'm happy they put street lights on the front though. I'm happy they put street Yeah. Australia. Yeah, they can switch their accent. Really? They all sound American?
What's that? Okay. Yeah, so we're going to get into, I'm still recording, so I would watch the video tonight for sure.
What's the channel?
Keith Connell 20. I've got it up on Blackboard. I think it's Keith Connell 20. I don't know. Okay, why don't we get started again? Because we got a lot of road to go. All right, so everyone understand what we've done thus far? So basically we've taken it and said, if it's an A, it's no good. If it's negative, it's no good. So here's a skill testing question for you. Is there a way that we can ensure that without having to do a try-parse?
How?
That's what I'm asking. Is there a way that we can do this without doing a try-parse so that we ensure that the data is valid, that it's not an alpha character, it's not a negative? How will we do this? And and the answer is really straightforward.
Like, if something does not.
I'm going to show you a way that you don't even need code. Now Nick's going, well, okay, I'll take that.
I'll take anything.
Okay, so the easiest way to do this, to force a person to enter in the right numbers or the right information, is to force them to. So what we're going to do is what's called a combo box. And what a combo box is a drop-down menu. All right, so if they don't have the chance to enter in -1 or A, your data is going to be perfect. So wherever possible, I would suggest that you use combo boxes. So for example, if you're talking about a street address, obviously you can't predict what their address is going to be. You would need validation there. Yeah.
So like date of birth, some combo boxes, like little calendars.
Yeah. Okay, well I don't know if that's a combo box, that's a calendar, but a combo, so Dropbox though, what you can do, and this has been a real sad moment for me, is when I just realized how far down I have to scroll in the years of birth. Okay, so I kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I'm thinking, oh, so, but that's another combo box where you're forcing them to enter in the right information. For example, the most frustrating thing for users is entering in a birth date, because if you just let it free flow, some people will put in November 23rd, 1991, because yes, that's my birthday. No, I'm just kidding. It's not my birthday nor my year. I know you're shocked. So some would type in November, like the full November. Some would type in Nov. Some would type in Nov dot. Some would type in 11/23/18. Some was, there's so many permutations to it that we have to start using smart coding to make sure that that information is what we need in our database. Well, the ID10T or the PEBCO, you will, if nothing else out of this class, you're going to walk out and you're going to know ID10T and PEBCO. Okay. So how we implement this is we take out the text box that says, how many bedrooms do you have? You can delete it from the form. Oh, yes, but I'll fix it for you. And then we drag over a combo box. No, I wouldn't suggest naming it the same thing, because don't forget, we want to make sure that if you've got a list of everything that you have, you want to know what is a combo box, what's a text box, what's a label. Because if you got 50 or 60 different elements and you're just naming it as a text box, you're going to be looking for a text box. So let's call it CMB. And then I'm going to call mine CMB rooms. Just like that. Now we got to go back into the code. And now that's where, as Nick anticipated, there's going to be some breakage. So we can now take the if statement and the Boolean, because we don't need that anymore, and comment it out. Actually, the one line that we don't want to comment out is the output. All right, and then all we have to do is turn the, oh, my knees. So then all we have to do is just basically turn the room count into CMB. And then let's try running that. And I'll go back over the code again. I just want to make sure that everything's going to function as it should. Now, if I wanted to enter an A, Oh, it's not going to enter. It's not going to function as it would because I forgot a primary part. Yeah, let's go back to the, okay, so we've got the code here, right? Everyone sees what I've done. I've commented all the if statement out and the validation out. I've just renamed string rooms to equal cmbrooms.text. That's it. Let's go back over to your forms because I missed a step. And you go to collection and see the ellipse beside collection. You just click that. And it should pop up on a window, correct? I'll show you again. So you can see the items collection. Once you've selected the combo box, the ellipse beside it pops up the window. And then you just can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you live in Nick's house, 8 bedrooms. And then that's it. Okay? So you just click OK. So is everyone there?
So just add in whatever.
Yep, absolutely. So you go, you see here under display member, you've got items and collection, the ellipse, and then you just type in on separate lines, whatever number you want. You can't find it? Yeah, some people's are set up differently.
Well, cheap is H. I like combo box.
That's definitely good.
That one's interesting. Did you have it? There you go. And then the ellipse beside it. And
Once again, I stress that it's a separate line per string. Then let's click OK, and we'll run it.
20 years of experience.
And then we can do a drop down for, and you're good. So what we've gone over today is your basic form that has no validation, but then we've added in the validation if we wanted to be more sophisticated. The easiest and least code heavy is just adding the combo box. All right, so yeah, Blair.
I can still type in a letter in it.
Really? Good job. So we'll still need to do validation then. See, I was all smarmy. Aha, aha, aha.
So let's try that. Let's validate it.
Even if I type in 0, though, it says 0.
Okay, well, so what we can do is an if statement at that point. All right? But certainly, though, this is the better way of doing things than leaving it up to the end user. But okay, so my apologies then. Good catch.
So can we just leave the if statement that we have in there?
You'd have to rename some variables.
We'd have to rename
Yeah.
the home, the text home clear.
Okay, so does everyone follow? So you're starting now to see all of a sudden some elements that I'm introducing to you that could be part of your assignment, number 2. We've got some validation. We've got some combo boxes. Okay. So all this said, now what I've done is, actually, before I do that, we're going into arrays. Now, some of you have been using arrays already in your assignments. Some of you have been using arrays without knowing you're using arrays because you've been following tutorials, we'll say, or borrowing code or whatever the case might be. So what is an array? Anybody? Yep. Okay, so a variable that contains multiple strings, Ryan? Okay, I can't hear you. Index list of values, all of one variable. So what I've got here are 4 pictures, and these are not my pictures. I borrowed this slide, but it does tell what variables are for sure. For example, if you look at the egg carton, it's developed in such a way that the eggs would be the elements of that one variable. The variable would be the container. Okay, you don't buy a loaf of eggs. Take 2. You don't buy a dozen eggs and get a loaf of bread in there. No, it's not the way it's designed. It's designed just to carry the eggs. Okay, so a stapler, same idea. You have a staple, which is all elements of the stapler, which would be the array. Okay? You follow? Yes, Nick? Wow, I must have explained it really clear. Okay. So basically, an array will help you, and this is where we're going to start leaning towards the mini assignment, okay? Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll tell you what the mini assignment is, and then you can start paying attention closer to what we're talking about. Let's go to week 11. And let's see, under assignments. It's probably not available to you guys yet, so I'll make it available as well.
Mini assignment?
Yep. Edit. Is it?
Okay, so it would have been available at noon today.
Okay, so now it's available. So basically, using arrays, multiple methods, and validation, correct your assignment 1. Those of you who have already done it are way ahead of the game. I heard that one member of the class looked at another member of the class's code and went, "Oh my God, look how long that is. You didn't need it to be." We did it deliberately so that we could introduce if statements and repeated if statements to you. So now, as we're going along, I want you to start listening to how you can implement validation into your assignment. And I want you to start thinking about how you can utilize arrays instead. Okay? Make sense? Clear as mud? Beautiful. Are you confused?
I can talk to you guys.
Okay, perfect. General?
More on arrays.
We're going to actually go through arrays. We haven't even done anything yet. Like once I explain it to you, because I'm just using an example right now, like a pseudocode. All right, so then we'll go over it, and if I'm hopefully going to answer your questions. All right, see that again? Yes.
How is the combo done? Is there a way to lock it so that you can type text now?
There should be. I'd have to look into that. I bet you there is. It's probably a settings in properties that says locked or something like that. I'll look into that and I'll let you know. Okay. It's properties called locked. Okay, so when we're talking about arrays, basically, I'm going to give you a variable name, grades. All right, so grades is the variable name or the array name. And all we're doing is adding elements into that list that Ryan was talking about. So what would be in that list for the variable name grades? The grades. So you can have, let's say, for example, okay, let's go to, this is where some of you might be happy. We're going to get away from, Visual Studio for a couple minutes. Let's go into, I posted it on weekly learning. There's a link, and I'm going to ask everyone if you can quickly just go there, sign in for an account if you want, or just use the one that they've got, like, which is, you don't have to sign in, but it helps It's not a essential thing. I'm not gonna. Okay. So the link, if you don't want to go onto Blackboard, is .netfiddle.net. Okay. So open up a new browser window. Just go to .net. Nick, just look at my URL there. .netfiddle.net. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us an opportunity to write some code without having to worry about the form, without having to worry about the button click or anything else. And because of that, this is where we're not going to use a label as an output. We're going to use what's called a console.writeLine. And what that's going to do is just output the whatever we're looking for in there. Okay? Does that make sense? You guys want a couple seconds to register, or are you guys good? Okay. Okay. So actually, what this has done is it's populated a console.writeLine. So what this does, when we type in console.writeLine, hello world, it'll appear down here what we're looking for. Okay? All right. But what we're going to be focusing on are arrays. So let's delete that line. And for those of you familiar, bear with me. Okay? Because I've got to walk before we can run. So let's try starting with some arrays. So what we do is we're going to go int 32 because the array that we're talking about is going to be grades. So, and we're not going to use decimals or anything else in this one right now. It's just going to be real numbers. So int 32, then a square bracket and square bracket, which basically tells it it's an array. All right, so we're saying that this array is based on integer, and we're going to call it grades. Now, here's where it gets a little bit more convoluted because now we have to instantiate it. So we say new. And then we're going to call int 32. Thanks. Interesting. It's not liking that. Int 32 grades equals.
I put a space taken with 32 and then it went away.
All right. Interesting. Okay, so does anyone want to take a stab at what this means?
Grades are going to be the 6 grade inputs.
Okay, so we have 6 inputs.
6 inputs.
And they're integer. So the int 32 grades is equal to a new array of six inputs. All right, makes sense? Now here's where I'm going to take, yeah. No, I was just, again, between you and Shannon, you keep stealing my thunder. Okay, so here's where here's where arrays get a little confusing. What's the starting point of an array? Stephen?
0.
Someone else? Oh, well done, Linda. Okay. So 0 and 0. It doesn't make sense. Don't ask me why. It's just the way they do it. If someone else has a real reason, I'd love to hear it. But arrays all start at the position of 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Everything else is just the mix.
Yeah?
Arrays always.
Well, the position are numbers, but arrays can be also strings. So what I'm saying is these are the positions. Okay? So now underneath, like in that array, whatever that location is, say for example, we put down 64. So array 0 would equal 64. Okay? Now if we were doing strings, and we're going to go into that in about 10 minutes or so, if we can move it over, like if I can get it so that we're moving along. Okay. Everyone good so far? Excellent. So now what we've got to do is we've got to actually put the information in. So grades, because that's what our variable's called. Now, whoop. No, I typed in the wrong spot, guys. Sorry. Grades. Now, it's our first one. So what's our location going to be? 0. Not 1, 0. Remember, all arrays start at location 0. And I'm sorry, I don't mean that to put you down, but you've got to start thinking.
You gotta start thinking that.
Unit number 1 is 0, whatever that unit is. So grade number or location number 0 is equal to, and we're going to put down 60. And then we can continue going down.
But we need a semicolon after that.
You would need a semicolon. For those of you who are familiar with arrays, thank you for playing along, because we're going to get to somewhere that's a little bit easier. $99. Equals 65. Say grades location 4 equal to 94, and then grades number 5 is equal to Nick's mark in this course, 100%. Okay. So basically what we've done, how many elements have we added? We've added 6 elements to this array. Starting at 0, going all the way down to 5. So let's try displaying this list. So how would we display? Now I've showed you the console.write line. How would we display the third element, say, on this list? Anyone want to take a stab?
Question.
Yep.
Up top, you have the integers bracket. The integers equals 6. So wouldn't that be 7 then?
No, because we're talking about 6 elements, not 6 positions.
Okay, so then up there, where it says
That's the total physical count.
Total physical count.
Yeah. Okay, so does anyone want to try the console statement? Yeah. Got right? Okay. Remember, now this is new, so I'm going to walk you through. Do you remember what the example showed? It was right line.
Oh.
Okay, so right line, in parentheses.
Grade brackets open. Whatever number you want.
We wanted the third element.
So open bracket. Sorry, open bracket 2.
Like that?
Right line. Right here. Right line.
Yeah, I had actually selected right line, and it didn't like it. Okay. Okay, so let's run that. All you have to do is push run. And the third element is 99. But where it gets confusing is it's only location number 2. All right? Everyone follow that? So now, here's one for you. What happens without you guys doing it? What do you think will happen if we do element 10? Yep, Brian?
Array index out of bounds.
Sounds like someone's been there. Okay, so an array index out of bounds exception. What does it mean?
It means you picked an array that wasn't actually picked.
Right. So if my array were students, every one of you is an item. If I looked for student number 80 enrolled in this class, that would be an array out of bound exception. Does that make sense? So let's try running it.
Program's saying that my period in between console and right line is an error. Yes, and then you know, can't do that. You have an error.
Interesting. Makes no sense whatsoever. All right, well, can you,
I love code.
there's days that code works, you don't know
I'm
why.
still gonna follow
So we've asked for the position or location 10. And what the code is returning is it's saying index was outside the bounds of the array, meaning there's no location 10. All right, make sense? Everyone good? Are you guys good with arrays so far? So if there's a quiz tomorrow or next class, you'll be good with it? There's not a quiz, but I was just checking. Okay. All right. So just let me catch up here. All right, so one of the most efficient ways that we can display an array would be what? So that we can scroll through and see all the elements of an array. Brian? A for loop. Okay, so now all of a sudden, we're starting to go, oh, okay, I remember that from last week. So now we're going to bring in a for loop into our code so that it goes through every element of the array. So do you want to give it a shot, Ryan, or do you want me to do it? You've done it already? All right, tell us what you did.
For,
Yeah?
I equals 0.
Int I equals 0. Whoop. Int I equals 0. Yeah.
Semicolon.
Yep.
I is less than grade dot length.
Okay, so you've jumped ahead of the game, but that's okay, because that was grades.length. Yep.
Semicolon, hyphen.
Okay.
Parentheses, and then it's the same line.
Yep.
As before, and instead of grades, that's 10, we want grades instead of 5.
Okay. So what we're going to do is I'll walk you through what we've done. So what Ryan suggested is a for loop. So for int I equals 0. Why didn't we go I equals 1 if that's the first element? The starting point for any array is 0. Okay? Because I is going to return right here. Okay, so we've got I equals 0. So if we just stopped it right there, grades will be equal to grades location 0. All right, so we've got that part. Then while I is less than grades dot length. Now he jumped up a little bit, but that's okay because I was going to just go less than 5. But what grades dot length does is it takes the grades array and it just says however long that might be. Now this is the really nice thing about arrays is because you can have, if you look around here, and like I say, our array is students. Actually, it's not students, it would be, let's say, marks at this point. Ryan's array is going to be a lot different than Linda's, which is going to be different than Josh's, because each one of you take different amount of courses. So we can't hard code in I is less than 5 because Linda might be taking 7 courses, Ryan might be taking 3, and you might be taking 5. So it's saying however long this list is, that's while it's less than that, and then I plus plus means basically every time we scroll through, it adds a number to I. Make sense? And then all you're doing is doing a console write line where grades I. So the first one's going to be grade 0, second one's going to be grades 1, and so on and so forth. So let's run this if you haven't already. And basically what it's done is it scrolled through all of our list and just output it onto the right line. Does that make sense?
But it's not a great calculator, it was a letter, the numbers in the letter.
I'm not going to tell you exactly. I'm giving you the elements that you have to piece together. You got it, Shannon?
Yeah. And
Excellent.
I need to see an optional because I just saw a comma, but it's a semicolon.
Okay.
Already a comma.
All right, perfect. And that's perfect for, my brain's gone mush again. Anyhow, debugging. Okay, so this is great. But what if you have 30 or 40 different grades in there? Having to write grades 0, grades 1, grades 2 gets a little bit daunting. So what we can do is we can take all of this.
Why did we delete all that?
Because I'm going to show you what we can do instead of that. All right, so all you have to do is go int 32 grades. And here's where it gets really sweet for you. If I typed correctly, it would be good. Grades equals. Now the bracket, and now we go 60. I don't know whatever you guys entered, 65, 78, 99, 100, 32.
No, you didn't. You did it in order.
Oh, I didn't put an order?
Oh, I've been looking at the bottom one. It doesn't matter though.
Okay. Oh, okay. And then we can just take out the one instance of the grades. And I've taken all those lines of code and turned them into about 5 lines. I've declared int 32 grades equals, and all of our grades, and I've got to put a semicolon after that, and then our for loop. And it will function identically. So let's run it. And as you can see, it's entered in the new numbers. Pretty sweet. Makes it easy. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you have an option of doing either or?
It's,
Usually this one's easier.
and we've done situations where one is easier than the other. Both are equally effective. If I had my choice, I would, and if I were your senior coder, I'd be saying this way is the best way because it's shorter code. There's no code bloat there. And again, we're going back to the code bloat, thinking about assignment number 1. So how we can now start eliminating some of those things. All right, but you're right, both do work. So will it get you to the end point here? Yes, it will. Will this? Yes. Yep. But, and that's what I want is for you guys to see how long code can be or how short it can be. So, all right, so is everyone good this way so far? Okay, I'm going to throw a knuckleball at you. Now, based on what you're seeing, I'd like you to create an array of, you guys all follow baseball? No? You guys know baseball? Your 3 favorite baseball teams. All right? Okay, so create an array with your three favorite Blue Jays teams.
That would be easier. Actually.
Yes, your 3. Well, I could say Blue Jay players, but no one would know.
Can we just go sports teams?
Sports teams in general is fine. I don't care. Or your 3 favorite siblings. Your 3, whatever. But it's got to be words.
Like the pirates are the best.
Did I just hear the Pirates of the best uniform?
I do. I love it.
Somebody just watch it for their butts.
All right. So how are we making it now?
So are we doing this here?
Yeah, and just enter it into the. Now, if you're logged in, you can save the code that we've done. If you can't, then if you're not logged in, then you can't save it. Like, have you created an account? There you go. So is everyone good? No?
I just thought I'd mention, like, the thing we were talking about opt-in checkboxes.
Yeah.
They automatically check the
I
box.
know, I noticed that last night.
Check it.
I noticed that last night, so that's really against Castle. Bad
I
form.
see it all the time though, more often than not, there's at least one box that's checked.
Yeah.
That you have to opt out of, not opt.
You can argue that you never opted for that, you didn't see it.
That's like, organ donor rates.
Yeah.
In different countries. Some countries like Canada, you have to opt in.
I believe that's changing.
There's
But
others
yeah.
that you have to opt out.
Yeah.
Ours is changing
I
to opt out.
think it's changing to opt out.
As of next year, if you renew your driver's license, you're
Yep.
automatically an organ donor, unless you tell the DMV you don't want to be.
I feel like that's like,
Or if you tell them that you only want your body used for science.
it's true, but.
Who would want my organ?
No, it ain't good.
Okay.
That's my liver.
So, our 3 favorite sports teams. So how do we start?
The Leafs and the Jays and the Argos. There you go. All Toronto teams.
Okay, well, careful because I'm gonna ask you how you did it.
I don't know because I said you wanted
Okay, so who wants to start?
String under public static voice.
Yeah.
String brackets. Open quotes. And whatever you want. What are we doing?
Sports teams.
Sports teams. Oh, is it brackets? It's brackets.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Those aren't brackets. Did you mean parentheses?
Those are braces.
Those are drugs.
Yeah.
I put-
Oh, but square bracket, I'm sorry, okay. I got it now. There we go.
Okay. And then base
Sports
sports team.
teams,
One word.
yeah, yeah,
And then equals
yeah,
open brace. And so I got an error with like, you can put your strings in quotes.
yeah,
Individual quotes.
okay,
I
so,
have sports teams.
all right, Leafs,
Yeah. And then
No, I wasn't.
Raptors,
only Leafs throwing it.
and then we're gonna call it Blue Jays, what the heck? Okay. Like that?
And then semicolon.
Semicolon? Does everyone see what we've done there? All right, so let's try outputting that to the console line. So how will we output it? Anybody? Okay,
So after the semicolon. Yep, then go ahead. 4.
okay, a for loop, sure.
And basically the same thing you just had, so. I equals 0. I is less than 14.
Okay,
Also got red line.
Yeah.
Sports teams
yeah.
and then brackets I.
Okay, so sports teams, brackets, I. Right?
Brackets I, sorry.
Oh, is that,
Sorry.
no, that's my typo. I did hear you say I too. Okay, so does everyone follow what we've done? When you're doing a string array, you've got to enclose them in quotation marks because it's not an int. We're saying everything within these two quotation marks is the first element, then the second element, the third. And then all he's done is he's created a for loop for int equals 0 because 0 is the first location of the array, where I is less than sports teams dot length, and then I plus plus every time it iterates. Okay, makes sense?
Yeah.
Are we going to run it?
Yeah.
Oh, you look pained.
Oh, I just asked Ryan if
And now all of a sudden we've got the 3 sports teams right here. Okay, see, you guys are just like, you're just so in tune with me that you're just 2 steps ahead, or I'm just teaching too slow.
No, you're going as fast as your slowest student.
Okay, so with all this now, can we change the first element? Say, for example, someone is, dare I say, a Senators fan.
Wrong with them.
I know. Okay, so what will we do? Does anyone want to?
Not sped.
Does anyone want to take a stab?
Just change what you have in your.
We could, but what programmatically? How would we do it? All we have to do is just go sports teams, and then we're doing element 0, which is the first element, equals. I can't even spell Senators. Oh. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to copy that for loop again because I want to run it both times. All I've done is I've said, okay, so for the sports teams location 0, overwrite the Leafs in the second time around, and I've just copied the for statement. Okay, makes sense? So when I push run, I'm going to get 6 elements on my list. You see what's happened? Okay. So we've got the first iteration of it was Leafs, Raptors, Blue Jays, and we went, okay, you know what? No, there's a Senators fan somewhere in the world. So we're going to change Leafs to Senators, and we're using the same for loop, so it generated Senators, Raptors, Blue Jays. Does that make sense? We're golden? Okay, so I'm going to leave you with one thought, though, because this is where we're leading into next week, is we've got the arrays down, correct? Okay. Next week, we're going to be talking about multi-dimensional arrays. So what we're talking about here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now what we can do is we can store multiple pieces of data in the multi-dimensional array. So what we would have to do is we would have to call 1, 2. And what we would do there is 1 column 2 would be whatever that is. All right? So yeah, things get a little bit more tricky. So next week we're going to start with a review of arrays because I really want you guys to get that down. And please remember when you're coding, 0 is the first spot. Because I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but you're going to look at your code and you're going to think that it's 1, and you're going to wonder why the heck it's not working. Check that first. Okay? Yeah, Stephen.
Her name, she has to go.
Shannon.
Change the drop-down list from drop-down box.
Okay.
You can't input into that.
There you go. Perfect. Okay, so what Stephen pointed out, he's done a little research for us, and remember when we were doing the combo boxes? Instead of doing a drop-down box, do a drop-down list, and it will prevent you from entering anything into the box.
Actually, I was looking at that when you said it didn't work. I just took everything, instead of it being all coded out or lined out. All I took was the very bottom line off of it, looks like the combo box, whatever. If you don't select the number within it, if you try to put a number or a letter, it actually comes up invalid entry.
All right, perfect.
Like the very end, like the very last line of code where it says message box shows invalid entry, the line under it is deleted.
Beautiful. See, you're debugging. Okay, so that's it for today. Don't forget, if you have questions, I'll be here tomorrow evening, E104 at 7 o'clock. Hopefully there's no snowstorm tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
You know, we used to have. Have you ever gone to, I probably don't have any more, Staples? They have these buttons.
Yeah, that was easy. Yeah.
Every time we crossed, we squashed a bug.
Yeah.
Someone would run up to the desk and go, that was, you know,
Yeah.
press it. So you hear that going off to the
And
office.
it's such a
right?
good morale
And it
thing.
was just, people would go, it'd be cheers starting up, right?
Oh, yeah.
So people would just be really getting into the.
Oh,
right?
it was kind of going back to the rubber chicken thing that I was talking about last week.